excuse me, that was D. Then we move on to E, discussion of emergency response plan. I might add, having worked with this, I think one of the biggest hurdles we have to come up with is that we didn't, at the time, we didn't have really a way to get the word out to people. What, you know, the TVs didn't work. There were no radios. I mean, it's hard to tell people about it when you have no communication. So I was talking with several people, and they thought we should come up with a plan that everybody knows that if this ever occurs again, that their site will be at this particular place, and it will be set up at this time, and if there's any questions, to report there, just so that we always have the same routine thing going on. That was one of the biggest concerns I've heard people say. And we did the best we could in the town. We actually sat down and talked about who we thought were at risk, the biggest risk, and the police department, along with a couple other volunteers, went door to door that night to bring people in to the warming center, because it was the only way we knew to really reach people.
The way the plan operates is we are basically a portion of a county plan. There's a county emergency plan that's, of course, coordinated then through Jim Bullock, and of course our plan is a part of that in how it relates to the community, our community. That plan that we are currently working under was originally developed in 1998 to deal with the Y2K situation and concerns that resulted from the scare with 2000 coming up. That plan, to some degree, there were some portions of that plan that worked very fluidly. There were other portions of it that, of course, we recognize that need some work. And one of the things we're planning on doing internally on possibly Thursday afternoon is I'm going to sit down with the department managers, and we're going to do an evaluation of what worked well, what needs to be improved upon, and just so that we can use a continuous improvement method of looking at how things went, and making sure that we do a better job of it in the future. You know, some of the things that I've already recognized from a local perspective, things that were a concern was that we needed to clarify a little bit better the transportation issue of how to get people to the shelter once that became a need. Another thing that was an issue, of course, was getting the word out not only to our community, but to see how the word was getting out to the rural areas, the REC customers, who even to this day are still sitting without power.
We don't have any power out there yet.
For several more days, I've been told.
What's that?
I've been told it could be several more days for some customers.
We also, you know, one of the discussions is that what the roles and responsibilities of every department were, and making sure that that everything that was needed to be performed was being performed, and where some cross support could be provided, it was being provided. And all in all, I think that I've been relatively pleased with the way that things have gone within the community. I mean, we're by no means have been perfect in this process. But we definitely did have a shelter available when needed. We definitely did keep the utilities up and operational that are within the city's control. And we also were able to allow emergency services to be able to be provided, and communication was kept up at a local level.
This after-action report that you're referring to that you want to sit down and do?
I'm sorry?
This after-action report, if you will, that terminology that you guys want to sit down and do, is that something you're going to present to the council for, you know, their input to, see once what, you know, if there's anything that we thought that maybe could have been changed, or is this going to be an internal? No,
actually, part of the discussion tonight was to hear your input, your members' input into if you had any input into the process. And what the hope is that between discussions by the council, and we can have further discussions in the future, and by the internal discussions with the management team, is to make adaptations to our emergency procedure. Like for instance, one of the things that has come up is that our policies put a limit on the amount of bankable overtime. And in these emergencies type of circumstances, especially if you look at the last month, where we've had a lot of employees working a lot of overtime, we're in a situation where those limits are something that are a limitation to, puts us into a strained position of just paying out large sums of overtime pay to employees because we have a policy that limits the amount of time they can bank. And it's definitely something that in a crisis situation we should really evaluate those limits and some flexibility on how to work outside of those limits. So that's another thing. Just things you wouldn't even think of when you're looking at an emergency plan. Everybody looks at communication. Everybody looks at keeping the infrastructure up. Everyone looks at utilities. But not everybody thinks about the fact that, Bob, how much overtime have you probably put in the last month?
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
It isn't just myself, it's the whole crew.
Well, I'm just using you as an example. Danny, how much overtime have you put in the last month? How many hours you work on Christmas Day, Danny?
Oh, I don't remember.
How many hours you work on New Year's Day?
Whatever. Yeah.
Now, how many hours? You ask any city employee, and you'll find that overtime has been something that has been the norm for the last month as we get hit with storm after storm.
Well, let me add, and this is off the top of my head, I think in the last 2 months for the whole crew, probably in the area of 160 hours overtime. That's a lot.
In the last 2 months?
2 months. But we've had a lot of snow. We've been busy.
And when you have a street preparation budget and a road use preparation budget of $300,000 combined, that money doesn't go very far when you have these type of instances going on. It seems like every week and a half. So, and as much as we can take the emergency measures to cover any overage situations with the hopes, of course, that, and we're somewhat confident at this point, of course, FEMA is going to come in at some point. Well, right now, we don't know when that point's going to be. And the other side is that we can't just spend out our money, our reserve money, and borrow money from other funds temporarily on loan with forever. At some point, I have to be able to be in the black somewhere else on the budget to survive. And it's a harsh reality this season that I'm very concerned that where we're going to be from the perspective at the end of this year in the general fund as a result of if the storms don't stop, we're simply going to blow the general fund all to death.
Well, one of the suggestions that I heard from someone was that we get our plan in place, whatever it might be, and make sure that it's available to our churches and our local organizations because they could help get that information out. One of the very first things that we did was contact the churches and say, can you look at your list of parishioners, and if there's somebody on there that you know is at risk, because you know them better than anybody, let us know that. Well, there's a good place to get that information out. They get information out about all kinds of things. So if we would look at all those entities, plus newsletters, that information could be put in newsletters. I think we just have to, first of all, formulate the plan and then figure out a way to best communicate it to everybody in the county.
You know, one of the things we've really talked about is expanding the communication channel. You know, a couple of the things, and quite by the opportunity of putting minds together, you come up with making sure you don't miss too many through the crack. REC, for instance, communicating to REC that we were having a shelter, it gave them an opportunity to be able to share that information with their members. Well, you might think on a local level, if we don't look around enough, we might not think about talking to REC because they don't service the town.